Let's see what happens. All right. So our focus today, as is the case with most diversity in webinars, is on inclusion, and more specifically on behaviors that occur between coworkers or faculty and staff, or staff and students, or faculty and students in the workplace. And our role here is to try and build a more inclusive environment. This is really distracting. Is it only distracting to me? Or are you okay with? Yeah. If I don't use the microphone, the other people can hear. All right. The what? The lapel mic. Maybe we can, should we just go back to the old model?
I think the mic is required regardless of.
Okay, well. Okay. All right, so today, you want to go ahead and hit the thing? We'll be focusing on creating a culture of inclusion. And in terms of culture of inclusion, what we mean is behaviors such as having a norm of respect, treating others fairly, and encouraging each person's talents to shine. As importantly, of course, is holding one another accountable to be inclusive in our daily interactions. So today's presentation will have 4 different parts. Go ahead. Go to the next slide. First of all, we're going to focus in on microaggressions. So I'm going to begin with the definition and examples of microaggressions. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of microaggression on our outcomes. I'm going to mention a specific tool of resistance. So this is a skill seminar so that we can walk away with what are things that we can do to effectively counter microaggressions. And then I'm going to have you do a practice exercise followed by a knowledge check, and then an opportunity to follow up on the skill that you're learning. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what is a microaggression? First of all, how many of you have heard the word microaggression? Okay, good. So you probably have a sense for the fact that microaggressions are brief, commonplace, daily indignities. Okay, so these are things that make people feel bad. They can be verbal, they can be behavioral, they can be environmental. So somebody can make a remark to you, or they can engage in behavior like rolling their eyes or making exasperating sounds, or it can be an image or something that is in the environment, posters that are negative towards women or that are negative towards immigrants. So anything in the environment that presents an indignity. Next. And it doesn't make a difference whether the slight is intentional or unintentional. Sometimes people will make a joke and say, I was just joking, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings after the fact. But if you know how your behaviors, how your words are landing, it doesn't matter what the intent was. What matters is the impact. The next. And for the most part, microaggressions communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights or insults. In essence, go ahead. What microaggressions serve to do is emphasize a target's differences, another person's differences from oneself. And rather than making the person feel like a colleague or a team member, they make them feel like an other, like an outsider, like they don't belong. So they reduce one's sense of belonging to a work unit. Here are some examples that represent microaggressions. That can include things like interruptions, when you're talking and somebody interrupts you. They include the presence of pejorative jokes, so making jokes that make others feel bad. You're going too fast. Could you go back a little bit? I'm still in that first quadrant. They can include attentiveness. If you're talking to somebody and they pull out their phone and they start texting, or you're giving a presentation and people obviously are working on email or something else on their laptop. It can also include mispronouncing people's names repeatedly. If they tell you what their name is, this is what their identity is. And if you can consistently continue to call them by a different name or use of a different pronunciation, that constitutes a microaggression. Sometimes we just make clumsy statements, like you go up to somebody who may have lost weight and you say, "Oh my gosh, you look like you've lost 70 pounds." Well, if the person has lost 10 pounds, that's really not a very nice thing to do. You're telling them that what you saw before was really far more than what was there. Any kind of slur, whether it's based on race or gender, offensive symbols and images, let's move on, but as well, things like being in a meeting and not giving credit to a person for a contribution that you made, or crediting it to somebody else who said it, 3 speakers later. What you're doing is you're ignoring the person who made the original contribution and making them feel like they're not even recognized in that setting. We know now that people have pronouns that they prefer to be used, and some of us are older. I can speak for myself, and I'm in a pattern, and so I make mistakes. But if I continue to repeat the misuse of pronouns, that tells others in the environment that I don't respect this person's individuality and how they see themselves. So it's important to have that level of respect. Confusing people from the same racial or ethnic groups, calling somebody by a name when that name belongs to somebody else. We haven't taken the time to get to know them. And these are some others: attributing difference of opinions to stereotypes, conveying low expectations, remarking on someone's physical traits, or going up and touching like their hair and saying, "Oh, this is different." And obviously mentioning that certain cultural practices, whether it's attire, where the celebration of holidays, or whether it's their dress, and calling that strange. It's different. The world is full of difference. The human fabric comprises many, many differences, some of them very striking, some of them very subtle, but it doesn't mean they're not part of your group. And you should celebrate what is different. You learn from it. Okay, why is it important to look at microaggressions? Well, microaggressions have negative impact on people. Can you imagine what it's like to be the target, that is the person who receives this microaggression, and how you feel when somebody makes a negative remark about you or jokes about you continuously, or ignores you or misnames you? Obviously, some of the things that you feel are a reduced sense of belonging. Over time, if these differences are called out chronically, it may reduce your self-esteem and even your level of competence. As well, there are mental health implications, so the person can feel anxious or depressed. But the impact isn't limited just to the target. The impact of these microaggressions can also have an impact on the group or the work environment. So click. There you may sense that people don't think we have a good community here. People dread coming into the lab or to the learning environment, because they think, oh, this interaction or this exchange is going to happen again. So it's not good for the overall group. It doesn't become a collaborative place. And then finally, and I'm sorry, this, for some reason, this label is down here, the person who actually engages in that microaggression, when they continue to do this, they kind of lose the sense of compassion for other people. And sometimes they're even labeled a bully by others, although they may not realize that they're being seen that way. So if these microaggressions are negative, not just for the person who's receiving it, but also for the group and the source, why do we do them? Why do we engage in microaggressions? One possibility is that we do so out of habit. These are things we hear other people do, or these are things we've done and we really haven't taken time to process or think about them, and so we continue doing them. Sometimes we're unaware that our words or our images or behaviors are having this kind of impact. It doesn't matter. The microaggression is still there. The negativity that emanates from it is still going to happen. Another set of causes revolves around getting some sense of power or a boost in one's own self-esteem when you're able to put other people down. There's an acronym called POO, P-O-O, and it stands for power over others. And sometimes people think that if they can make others feel uncomfortable, that creation of discomfort elevates their own position in the situation. So they're doing it to boost their self-esteem. We also know from a vast literature in social psychology that whenever you divide people into in-group versus out-group, us versus them, on any dimension, whether it's a regular dimension that you and I see all the time, like race or gender, or whether it's an arbitrary dimension if we divide people into X types or Y types, and X and Y don't really mean anything, you're just slapping a label on somebody, then we show a distinct pattern where we try to benefit anybody who I consider to be like me, and we try to disadvantage anybody who doesn't seem like me or isn't in my group. And then finally, we can't rule out, and in fact, this is a big reason for microaggressions, is some of us walk around with biases. We may feel a certain way towards people who are from other countries. We may feel a certain way towards people who are LGBTQ. We may feel a certain way towards people who come from low-income backgrounds. And those biases have no place in a professional world, but we walk in with them. And so we display them through these use of microaggressions. And some of the bigger elements that contribute to microaggression are, of course, having racist or sexist attitudes. So there's a multitude of reasons why we engage in microaggression. But what I want us to understand today is, given their ubiquitous nature, that is, they happen so frequently, and given that they can have such a negative impact, not just on the person who's the recipient, but on the whole environment, as well as the person who's delivering the microaggression, it really is important for us to try and negate, to counter these microaggressions when they occur. So today, I'm actually going to be introducing you to two tools to counter microaggressions. One is an indirect tool, and I'll spend very little time on that, but it really is replacing microaggressions. So taking up as a habit, engaging in certain behaviors that replace the tendency for people to engage in microaggressions. I call that the Willie Sauvignon effect, okay? I'll tell you why in a minute. The second tool I'm going to give you, however, is the open the front door technique. So I won't say anything about this until I describe the replacement or indirect way. And so that involves the use of micro affirmations. So what's an affirmation? Anybody? When you hear the word affirmation, what does that mean to you? Acknowledge. Okay, what else? Positivity, absolutely. So if you create an environment where micro affirmations are a regular part of the behavior, it creates a community. It says, oh, people here do good things. And so when I named it after Willie, can anybody tell me why I might have done that? Yes, Willie is always positive. She always says thank you. She always says good job. Whenever she can, she affirms a person's professionalism, their work, their contributions to a group. And if you create that kind of community, one that comprises micro affirmations as a regular pattern of behavior, I can tell you that the likelihood that microaggressions will come up goes way down. So a tribute to my colleague and friend Willie, because she teaches us a lot in that regard. And we know, even beyond Willie, I will say, that when you have environments where micro affirmations are the pattern, are the practice, then that leads to greater inclusion. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. And I know all of you are capable of generating micro affirmations. So let's just do more of that. But the second technique I want to introduce you to is called the open the front door technique. Now, when you imagine opening the front door, what does that convey? What does that mean to you if you imagine an opening of the front door? What kind of meaning might that have? Yes, you're welcoming. It's a positive thing. It says come in. And in essence, that's the reason this technique is named that, but it really doesn't have anything to do with doors or with opening. It's simply taking that connotation of opening the front door. But in this technique, what you're going to do is you're going to disrupt the microaggression. And so you break the pattern by indicating, first of all, what you observe. And so the open the front door, I'm not ready for that one yet, Jen. So when you open the front door, we use this technique because you're taking the first letter of each word, OTFD, and that's the process that you're going to engage in, okay? Now, if I told you to remember OTFD on its own, it's probably going to go out the window. You might reverse the orders, you might create new labels. But as long as you can remember open the front door and welcoming behavior, then you can extract the O, T, F, and D, okay? So let's work through an example of how this might happen. Suppose here the microaggression that's being directed is that somebody's in a committee meeting, they present an idea, somebody across the table starts rolling their eyes, okay? That is a microaggression because it's sending a negative message to the person, right? What is the message being sent? Anybody? This is boring. What else? You're wrong. Yes. This is a crazy idea. This will never work. It's giving a judgment and placing a negativity in response to whatever is being presented. And often it happens even before the person has finished. So you haven't even given them the benefit of a doubt of getting through the entire logic. So if you were to engage in an open the front door technique for here, the first thing would be to clearly specify what you observe. So I see you rolled your eyes, okay? And I will say that addressing the microaggression can come either from the target or can come from somebody who's in the same group, okay? Another person who's sitting around and seeing the behavior. So it doesn't always have to be the person who has to be the one that responds. Anybody in the environment who wants to build community can take that step and respond. So you say what you observe. I see you rolled your eyes. Then you say what you think very clearly. I think we need to remain open. Okay, and these are truncated, but you can say, I think we need to remain open and listen to ideas, or I think we need to remain open in this context. Then you say what you feel. I feel uncomfortable when we don't. Now note that all of these are I statements. So whoever is doing the speaking is talking about them. They're not making judgments about the person who engaged in the microaggression. So you don't say, I think you're a jerk. Or you don't say, I feel you should leave the room. You're not being exclusionary. You're simply talking about how the behavior is having an impact on you. And then you very quickly go to the desire. Can we listen before making judgments? Okay. So you're not necessarily saying, can you stop your eye rolls? The key here is not to make people feel uncomfortable necessarily. It's to redirect energy in a positive direction. So it's not that you're making a judgment about the person who's doing the microaggressing, nor are you speaking for the person who may have been microaggressed against, because you could say, I think when you do that, it's going to make her feel bad. Well, you can't be inside that other person's mind, and they may not want anybody to be speaking about their experiences and what they're feeling. So what you want to do is keep it very quickly, I, and get to, can we do this? What is it that you want from this particular situation? Let's do one more. So the next microaggression, I forgot what it is, but let's see. It's a what? Oh, yes, a typical one. Interruptions. Don't put anything up yet. So how many of you have ever been interrupted when you're speaking in a group? Okay. All right. How many? Yeah, the next question was, how many of you have interrupted? Okay. We do both. We interrupt a lot and we get interrupted. And sometimes it's because we're so excited about the idea, and sometimes it's simply because we have a hard time connecting the brain to the mouth. And so some things in the brain go directly out, but the things that say, well, wait your turn, kind of go slower in that pathway. But nonetheless, how many of you think it's actually a good idea to interrupt? Okay, generally, most of us don't, unless there's a really important reason if something is going awry. So if you were to want to stop an interruption, what will your observation be? Who has a statement that would tell, this is what I've observed? What would that look like? What words would you use? Yeah, I hear you interrupting. Or more specifically, first one. Next one. You interrupted, okay? Now here's the think and the feel, okay? So there are things that you can say here. Right. Oh, I heard you interrupt. You can say that. Yes, I heard you interrupt. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yes. And I only truncated it because there was less space on that half. So, but you're right. I did do it in the others. No. Yes, but it wasn't as a matter of exclusion, so I won't consider that a microaggression. So this is very good. This is a teaching moment. Okay. So then what would be a think? Yeah, anybody. Go ahead. Yeah, I think you should hear the rest of my statement. So what do we, it's good to take turns. You can come up with anything that you want that makes sense to you, okay? And it's about you, so nobody can refute you. I think if you said something like, I think you're being disrespectful, then that gives the person the opportunity to counter back, I'm not disrespectful. And that gets you down the wrong path. So it's all about me, I think. So I think it's good to take turns. And then the feel, anybody have a feel that they want to add? Yes? You what?
I want to stop.
Okay, what, but you put it in terms of I feel something. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, you can say that, but remember, keep it about you. You don't want to engage the other person or make judgments about the other person. Let's try one more. I feel what? Yes, I feel it's important to have everybody have their say. And I added up here, I feel that there's much to gain from hearing all ideas, okay? So try to keep it about you, not about the person who's interrupting, not about the person who's being interrupted, unless it's you, of course. And then the desire is simply, I think, can we just let each person finish, okay? That's all you want, is to say, this is what we need, this is what I want, this is what I'm asking us to do. All right, any questions so far about any of these? And I can't see the other place. Oh, there they are. Okay. All right.
Puts it on the top. Is there a way to shrink it? More? That gives me that. Video panel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ed. Now, why does this form of micro-resistance work? Or, yeah, micro-resistance work? Well, it works because, first of all, it confronts the social dynamic directly. It minimizes embarrassment. So it calls out the pattern immediately, okay? Sometimes we see these things happen and we don't know what to say, and it just goes, and then later we realize, I should have said something, I should have done something. And we walk away, and then it happens again and again. So it's important for us to put a stop to these things, because the bottom line is, if you don't speak up, then you're being complicit in saying this can continue. And then nothing changes. Do you have a comment?
Well, this may be a remark, but it can be very hard to interrupt an interrupter, right? So, yeah, I know myself, I'm pretty dominant sometimes in a conversation.
Right.
And then it's hard to get in between.
It is hard to get in between.
It's also hard to say directly, like, I deal with it more. Well, if I can sense that what happened, then I see people like, but it takes a while to observe that I'm microaggressive.
Right, so it takes a while to recognize that you're doing it, and it may be hard for others to interrupt an interrupter, but it has to happen. Ed? Yeah. That's right, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And it's also, and this will come up later, is that those who are in the non-power position may feel a bit uncomfortable. But I'll share with you a little anecdote. I think many of you know I'm on leave at Bennington College this year. I have an administrative position there, and I report directly to the president. And when we have our senior staff meetings, you wouldn't believe the number of interruptions that happen. So at one point, I finally just got tired, and I told myself in my head, the next person who interrupts, I'm going to call it out. And so who was it? It was the president. And then for a brief moment, I thought, oh, why did it have to be her? But at any rate, I thought, nope, this is what I told myself. I have to hold up that integrity. And I called her out and I said, you interrupted. And I think it's best if we listen to each other's ideas. I feel that we accomplish more that way. So can you please hold your turn? And the whole room went quiet. And then momentarily, for a moment, people tried to be a little defensive upon it by saying, oh, well, we all interrupt. That's the way we do things. But she spoke up and she said, to her credit, no, Delia's right. From now on, let's each just listen to what the other person has to say. And she added, but don't take longer than you need. And then that way we can get through the meeting. And then she went further after we talked about it afterwards, because I wanted to make sure that there were no hard feelings. And she said, no, we needed to hear that. She goes, and on top of that, I'm going to fix it so that going forward, we don't bring our laptops to the meeting, because you can tell when people are checking mail or doing other things, because all of a sudden they start smiling. It has nothing to do with what's being talked about. So sometimes it's just making people cognizant who are either high power or who often do it quickly or without thinking about it, that, hey, can you redo this? Can you do it a different way? And most people are cooperative that way. I'll also say that the think and the feel are kind of interchangeable, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, because this is the way the human mind works. If you give somebody a justification, even if that justification doesn't really have a lot of significance, often they'll accede to your requests. They'll say they'll agree to it. Let me give you an example of this. In one social psych study, people were at the copying machine, and somebody came to them and said, can I cut in front of you? And 85% of the time, the person said no. Okay, so go away. Sometimes, however, the person who approached the person at the copier said, can I cut in front of you? Because I have to make copies. Oh, okay. All right. That is not a legitimate excuse, but it sounds like a reason. It sounds like a justification. And so this is the way the human mind works. In that case, only 35% of the people refused. So you're talking about a 50% difference in agreement if you simply insert that justification. So the think and the feel should be very quick. It sounds like a good reason why these things shouldn't happen. And can you please do this? And most people then will say, okay. All right, yes.
Yeah, sure. Do you allow the interrupter to finish before you take actions? Immediately?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a very good question. Yes, you don't give the space for interruption to continue. You call it out as quickly as possible, and it makes it less problematic that way. Okay. Other questions?
Just a situation where like you see somebody, for example, rolling their eyes and you want to call it on them. And in spite of you telling them multiple times, they don't listen. So is it okay to be little aggressive about it, saying like, no, you need to stop? Or should we, like, unless you do that, you cannot stop them because they keep doing that and they keep ignoring. So how do you respond?
In that instance, I think you call it out the one time when it's happening in that particular context. If it happens again, I wouldn't continue to do it at that point, but afterwards you might step aside with them afterwards, or have a group of you talk about, you know, what is good practice here? What makes people feel good? And why do you keep doing this? Is there something that you can do? Can we signal you each time you do it so that you become aware of it and see how much you're doing it, and work that way? I should also mention that sometimes the group is so large and trying to capture the microaggression and get the attention is not viable. So in those instances, it's easier to just talk to the person afterwards. I've been in faculty meetings, for example, when one faculty consistently sits in a corner and then starts having a sidebar conversation that others can hear, and then is kind of disrupting the main meeting. But to stop the main meeting in order to call attention to that may be overly disruptive. So in that case, it's better to just talk to the person afterwards. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so why do we want to do this, call out microaggressions, using the open the front door technique? Because it curtails the behavior immediately. So it puts a stop to that social dynamic. It again minimizes the embarrassment of the individual parties. So it's really about the process. It takes the opportunity to really express a clear and positive goal for the group as a whole, not just for that one individual. Because if one person is interrupting everybody or multiple people are interrupting everybody, whenever you decide to call it, it's not just going to help that particular person who's been interrupted at that particular moment, but it begins to create a culture for everybody. And then finally, it really just promotes a good meeting dynamic and an inclusive environment overall. We begin to think about how our behavior affects how we work as a group together and how we can collaborate and how we can encourage those talents to shine for everybody. And I think that's important in creating inclusion. Okay, how are we doing for time? Does anybody know what time it is? 12:30, perfect, all right. Great, so now we're gonna do a practice item. So let's go to the next screen, okay? And I want you to kind of break up in groups. So these two tables here, these two tables here, these two tables and those two tables. And then the people in the back can form another group. And at the other sites, just meet with whoever's there. And in each instance, I want you to identify a microaggression. And you can use one from your own experience, or you can use one of the ones that was listed earlier. So just very quickly identify a microaggression. If you have trouble with that, then I would recommend you use something like mispronunciation of names, misuse of correct pronouns, conveying low expectations to somebody, and that would be in the form of, oh my gosh, you finished the project successfully? Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like a compliment, but there's an underlying current there that suggests it's not. Or making remarks on somebody's physical attributes. Hi, Shorty. Oh, wow, your hair looks so different today. You know, take one of those regular type that I just mentioned, use that as a microaggression, and then very quickly generate the 4 statements. I see that you did, said, whatever. I think this, I feel this, and can we just do this instead? All right? So as the person who's calling it out, you can either be a target or you can be a witness to the microaggression. All right, so I'll give you a few minutes to do that.
So, I guess, would you guys consider a response, like if someone's looking for a response, you don't really get a response, consider that like somewhat like a microaggression? Because like now I feel like you guys are running this, you know, so, oh, like, I said this whole thing, okay, how's that sound? With no feedback. Did you guys consider that? Yeah. Something else. So you don't know what to respond. Yeah.
How do I get that back? When I need to, that thing that they showed me how to hide. That's not it. Oops.
We'll ask them. You can't just go up. Oh, I guess that's what you were trying to do, right?
Right.
See that we don't really have.
And if I right click, that just, I'm in PowerPoint, and it just gives me the PowerPoint options. You know, like hanging out on the edge should like trigger it to come back. Well, it was Miriam who knew how to make it go away. Maybe she knows how to make it come back.
Your input is really valuable. I feel like I need your opinion.
Did you find a microaggression?
Yeah, we don't know. But what's a microaggression?
Is when running a meeting is somebody is saying something, nobody respond to that. So it's like so without giving feedback, like nobody is
Right, so I would say,
Checking the calendar on the phone, taking notes, checking for anything, like opening something. That really brings me down the beat. Taking it a lot of the it might be I become clear. Get out of the so what can we do just to make it? I see that you working on
Maybe assume giving them the benefit of doubt that they're doing something. It might be.
I think if it is not related to the meeting, it would be nice if I put it away or the things you need. Because we have a lot of reading to say that.
You can say like, I think you're part of it.
It's always good. Sometimes I have success when I say, start the talk or what even starts. But that's
We can say that how we all put our phones away.
checking on time so that we have enough time for.
Okay, folks, I think we're good. So let's hear a couple of responses. Are we able to get any of the other groups online so that they can talk to us? In the meantime, who wants to volunteer to give us their script? Let's have a volunteer group here. Oh, Ed here in the back. Here, let me give you a
Kyle.
microphone.
Can we volunteer Kyle?
Oh, yeah. Great, go ahead.
So concentrate on making a point. No,
You just said you would do it.
no, I didn't.
No. Oh, I thought you said yes.
No.
We can hear you, so go right ahead.
Okay, we're gonna let Ed go.
Oh, you're going to let Ed go. Okay.
Well, we'll kind of pass the mic around. So Hamed, you started with the IC.
Yeah, we said if someone is talking and the other one in the audience is looking into his laptop, then what we should say. We said, I see you're not interested, you're more interested in what you're working on. And then I think we should all pay attention to the what is going on in the room or the talk. And then I feel we can all learn from the talk and talk about this later. And then can we all pay attention to the talk and then yeah.
Can I say something about it?
Yes, of course.
What if the person that is looking on the laptop is actually doing something related to the meeting? Okay, so we just kind of.
Okay, so in that, so two things. First of all, it's nice at the front end to establish we want everybody's attention on this so we can finish the task and get it done well. Okay, so you should establish at the front end. If people are doing things with their laptop that are relevant, then that should be established. So that this script was actually good, except for the very first. I see that you're more interested in other things. That's a value judgment. So you would say, I see you have your laptop open, or I see you're working on something intently. If in fact they are working on something relevant to the task and they say, oh, I was looking up this reference or this project that refers to what we're doing, then it's not a microaggression. But don't make a judgment right off the bat. Okay. Then did somebody from UC Davis want to share? Or from NMSU or Georgia Tech? Hello, can you unmute? You can unmute your sound on your end.
We decided not to share. We'll talk.
Do you have a microaggression at all, even if you don't have the script?
We actually ended up with a really bad discussion, but a really good discussion.
Okay, I will trust you on that. What about NMSU? Unmute yourself.
Well, we talk about pronunciation of our names. And I think many of us have experienced that. And so we were talking about the different phrases and comments that we can, using this technique that you're showing us, how to help others to, to pronounce our names correctly and to make us feel more comfortable also.
Okay, very good. So mispronunciation is an important topic. Do you have a script that you want to share with us, or are you just at that level of coming up with different ways?
I think Saide has some notes. Yes, go ahead. You're all shy. No. Huh? Yes, they can hear you, I think.
Okay, so mispronunciation.
We can't hear you. Can you speak a little louder or get closer to the mic?
Okay. My fault.
Actually, about the mispronunciation, I myself have a lot of experience about it. I know that actually.
We need her a little closer because we still can't hear.
You need to eat the mic.
She's very, very close.
Is there a microphone? Because we can hear Paula, but not her.
We can hear.
Paula, can you read the script?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello?
I think we lost you. Okay, so we're going to hold on this one. What about Georgia Tech?
Hi, Delia. I think for the discussion here at Georgia Tech, it was more about the context and the reasoning behind like how you actually use the four statements, kind of understanding sort of like the basis for it. We talked about some examples of microaggressions, but yeah, that was mostly what our discussion was about.
Okay, that's fine because you'll get to do something in a minute. Hold on, we have a contribution here.
I was going to say similarly in our group, we actually have more of a discussion about why sometimes something is a microaggression and then other times it's not, or culturally how in one culture that could feel like a microaggression, but in another culture that could be a normal way of business. So
Right, and actually those are the important things. So let me flip to the next slide because issues that come up, for example, are what are some challenges that you might face, not just in defining, but in responding to these? And so the issue that was raised here was one of culture, or we could also think of personal style. That is, some of us are very comfortable expressing that something is awry and others are a little bit more on the quiet side. So you have to work with your strengths, whatever that may be. And secondarily, in some cultures, certain behaviors may be microaggressions and others may not. I know that I come from the Latino culture, and for us, the touching or the hugging or expressing certain things or giving people what might be considered here cutesy names is typical. But in this in this culture, in Western culture, that may not be. So some of those are very important issues that do require further discussion. Another challenge that may come up is the power differentials. What if it's the professor, the boss, the supervisor, the faculty mentor, et cetera? And in those instances, you may be uncomfortable calling it out. So let's go to the next set. So one possibility, what you can do is schedule a lab session, a group meeting, or whatever it is to begin to establish or create norms. Have these discussions about culture. Have these discussions about what's in your comfort zone or not. But create what it is that people are comfortable with. And if somebody comes from a different background, then respect that background. But at least you get to learn from one another and understand, rather than making an assumption and ultimately making a mistake and othering somebody. I would recommend that all of us practice the script. You can practice it in your head. In fact, I have people who have gone through this workshop and then go home and watch TV and capture every microaggression that they see on TV. And then they begin to develop, what would I say? I see, I hear, I think, I feel. Can you do this? Or practice with your friends. If you've had this group meeting up ahead, then you can say to each other, I think that was a microaggression. Then talk about why that was a microaggression or why it was not a microaggression. And then work through together what the script would look like, okay? And that's a low stakes, because you've already had the discussion that this is the culture we want to create, one of inclusion. We sometimes don't talk about our work culture, but we spend so much time in it that it would make sense to understand what feels right to you, what feels right to you, what feels right to you. And it may be similar, but there may be differences. But better than make mistakes or othering somebody, get to know the context. You can also decide that you're going to get a buddy, a tag team, so to speak. And if one of you calls out the microaggression, the other one can say, yes, and I feel, and I think, and can we. So it doesn't have to be one person that goes through the entire script. Do I have something else? The thing that's important throughout this process is to try and keep it as simple as possible. So you don't have to give big, long I think or I feel statements. Remember, those are just the justifications, and you can do those quickly. Also, you want to reduce embarrassment as much as possible. So don't make judgment statements about the microaggressor. Don't make value statements about the person who's the recipient. Don't make it this is a good thing or this is a bad thing in terms of overall morals, but really, I think it's a good idea to do this. I feel this. Every once in a while, I hear back from workshops that I've done at Bennington College where students have been trained in this, and they say, when they're in the classroom to a professor or somebody else, they'll say, oh, Delia would call that a microaggression. And I think it would be good if you didn't do that or whatever. And then can you? So I'm not encouraging you to do that here, but sometimes just having the conversation and thinking about, how do I see these things happening? When do I see them happening? How can we change this? Because again, saying nothing changes nothing. Okay, so next steps. Usually we do a paper and pencil knowledge check, but we're going to try something new. So now it is time to pull out those phones or those laptops if you have them with you. And we're going to do an online process. And Jennifer here is going to walk us through it.
So if you text to Jennifer Chan 175, that's what you're entering in, and the number you're texting that to is 22333. That will put you in the starting position to do the knowledge check. I'm sorry? It's not case sensitive. That was a good question, thank you. If you're using a laptop and you'd prefer to use the laptop method over there, then you go to that website and you enter that same Jennifer Chan 175 in order to start it. So is everybody got to the starting gate? Yep, everybody's there? Great. So now you're in, and all you need to do now is you're going to be
Jennifer, can you go back? Sorry.
It's up at the top.
Oh, it's on the
instructions
top.
are
It's on the
still-
top.
the-
Okay,
The
okay.
instructions are on the top of the screen, and everybody gets what they're supposed to do. I can tell because they're putting their data in. Great. And everybody knows how to use this. I can tell that. Doing fabulous. Everybody done with that question? Great. I'm going to move to the next question. No, let me click. Hang on. I gotta. Hang on. There we go. There is the next question. What? Active learning occurring right before our eyes. Okay, next question. All right. Next question.
And this one just goes in. We will see all of these.
Right. You want to go to the next one? Because there's one more. Yeah, it's a multi. All right, we're going to go to these are all great examples. And we're going to go to the next question. And here's the.
Okay, so very quickly, if there's any topics that you want to explore in future trainings, you can type them in here or you can send them to us. But clearly you all did very well in capturing the concepts that we learned today. I just passed out to the people here a little summary sheet of what we discussed, so you can have that as a reference and take that away with you. And then I have, oh yes, one more assignment. Keep your phones. So one more assignment that actually involves also sending us data on text. And it's an encouragement for you to think about microaggressions going forward. So I would like you in the next few months, if you observe microaggressions happening in your workplace, send us a little description. We don't want people's names. However, we do want the roles Was this a student? Was this a faculty? Was this a staff? Was this a visitor? Okay. A bit of a description in terms of what happened. What was the behavior in question that you would consider a microaggression or could be perceived as a microaggression? Again, we're not engaging in judgments. What we want to do is simply have a collection of things that happened that you saw that we can learn to improve about. So we'll be also talking about this in the future. And then you don't necessarily, everything will be anonymous. You're just sending these in. But in the future, after you think about the microaggression, if you want to follow up with what would you do using the open the front door technique? How would you respond to that microaggression if you were right on top of it immediately? And what is the motivation for doing this? Well, first of all, obviously, we want to create a more inclusive culture, and we want everybody involved in identifying and fixing things that can go wrong. But secondarily, we will, hold off on this one, go back to the other one. I will have a raffle, and we'll randomly give 4 $25 Amazon gift certificates from the entries that come in. So we won't have your names when you send them in, but we will have a phone number that the message is coming from. And so we will text a message to that phone number asking you how you want to receive, if you're selected, that $25 Amazon gift card. So we, again, will give 4 of these, and your entries constitute your entry into, your descriptions that you text to us constitute your entry into this raffle. So any questions on that? All you have to do is type in, text the roles of the people involved, describe the behavior. That's as soon as you see it. And then later, if you want to follow up with how would you address that using the open the front door technique. And so the description is one entry, your resolution is a second entry. But if you have multiple microaggressions and multiple solutions, then that's great. We want to encourage recognition and attention to how you would deal with it. Okay, so want to win a gift card? Please send us your entries. Any questions on that? And if you have any questions later, please just contact me. And also, I believe the other sites also have the summary sheet, and you will get a copy of that either electronically on paper form so that you can refer back to it and continue to learn about microaggressions. Okay, so I think we're done for the day. Thank you very much.
What is the program for again? It like leads to PowerPoint? Oh, this. Oh, okay. Okay.